Hi. Welcome to our next webinar. This is again the Professional Development Committee of the Science Policy Group at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. The Science Policy Group is a mostly graduate in STEM student organization that's dedicated to people who are interested in the intersection between science and policy, and especially people who tend to do their day-to-day work is in science and they want all the things that they spend their time on to sort of be influencing policy. And so we do all sorts of things, from sort of informing people and nonpartisan advocacy to equipping our members to go off and do stuff in science policy for their careers. And that's what this webinar is a part of. So with us today, we have Allison Wheeler, who recently graduated from her master's program, and we'll get into her background in a bit. And she's going to be going into the Illini Science Policy Fellowship, which is the subject of this webinar. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Grant.
So the first question I had was just, can you give us a brief introduction to you, and then sort of why you were interested in, the fellowship in science policy?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Allison. I got two of my bachelor's degrees from the University of Illinois. I graduated with bachelor's degrees in global studies with a focus on governance, conflict, and resolution, and also a degree in German studies. And I went on from there into a 5-year BA/MA program in European Union studies. And so I just graduated in May 2020 with that degree. And I guess I got interested in science policy once I really entered the master's program in European Union studies and learned about how interconnected all policy can be. There's bleed over from one section to another. So I don't have necessarily a background in STEM education, but I learned a lot about it through all of my other studies. And so that just informed me of how important it is to draw your attention to it with all of the regulation that comes in with science policy, how we have to answer questions of ethics in policy now. Is it state level? Is it federal? For the European Union, is it a supranational regulation? So that's really what attuned my attention to this, and finding this fellowship deepened that connection even more so.
Got it. Thanks. And so was there anything in particular, because obviously, with global studies and European Union studies and stuff, policy was probably more or less on the horizon for
Yep.
a chunk of that. But so what was it about, can you talk about like a point when you realized that you wanted to sort of focus that on science policy as opposed to something else?
So this was really informed by the fellowship. I was introduced to it. This is the first year of the fellowship. So I'm in the inaugural class, and the fellowship was presented to me for science policy. I think there were a couple, I guess if we're going before I was introduced to the fellowship, there were a couple classes that really attuned me to thinking about more environmental impacts within science, thinking about climate change. I took a couple really inspiring water crisis classes and how it plays into human rights. Classes that focused on international security, cybersecurity. So I became more interested in the tech side. And so that piqued my interest. I was more interested more so in the political side, and that's what my thesis was on. Wasn't necessarily focusing on science policy, but it's always remained in the periphery. There, you can't escape it, is what I've essentially learned. And so attending talks about cybersecurity, about, biosecurity. I also took a really interesting class on global biosecurity, which I think I was the only non-bio STEM major in the class. I was in global studies at the time, and it was fascinating to me. And I'm really glad I took that class, because that was also a great factor in keeping this in mind.
That's awesome. I can say I came from the opposite end. Like my thing is computer science, and I started taking global studies classes and like history, science policy kind of stuff. And like I sort of came in with the opposite, where I was the only person who was in STEM doing things on the other end, and I realized how much I liked that. So I totally get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And having these interdisciplinary classes where you have people from all areas of the university to provide perspectives, I thought it made classes like that even more enriching. And I think this fellowship does that as well. With my position in in a department for innovation and technology, I am able to provide a different perspective that wouldn't normally be present or wouldn't be thought of to have in that kind of setting.
Mm-hmm. So that's an excellent segue then to what's this fellowship that you're the first class ever of?
Yeah. So it's called the Illini Science Policy Fellowship. It's sponsored by the University of Illinois Extension Office. And basically it's a fellowship for postgrad, postdoc students to get into public service and working in the state level, to work on science policy and work on key issues in our society right now, like health and community, education, some core issues within science policy, and introduce these graduates to public service. So I applied. There's different host agencies that offer that also apply to be a part of this fellowship. And there were, I believe, 6 this year, and I was matched with the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology.
Got it. So how long are you going to be sort of with that department then?
Yeah, so it's a 1-year fellowship, and I started with them in the middle of July. There's been some really fun logistical things with COVID involved, of course, but started in the middle of July, and I moved to Springfield. I'm from Springfield, so it wasn't a very hard move for me. And our office is in Springfield. Although currently, as you can see, I'm at home. I work from home with the agency, and a great point made by my boss was, if the Department of Innovation and Technology can't work from home with their technology, how can we expect others to? So
that is a fair point. So can you talk a bit about sort of what you've been working on during your time so far at the agency and what you're planning on in the future with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been thrown into an entirely different world with this fellowship, which is great. Like I said, I don't come from a STEM background or education background. However, I matched with DO-IT is the acronym for it. I do it in the STEM education policy group. So I and my boss work on furthering STEM education in Illinois in K through 12 and post-secondary, which is obviously a very apt subject now, considering COVID. We're thinking about how to make education, STEM education, more equitable within the state of Illinois. And that means closing the digital divide. That means bringing all communities together and helping all Illinois communities, as diverse as they are, have the same opportunities to technology and broadband access. So we work with other departments like the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity as well, to bring education and technology into the homes and schools across Illinois. So some really cool projects that we're working on right now is a virtual reality project. We're working with an engineering professor at the University of Illinois, using his technology within virtual reality and mixed reality to bring several curriculum units onto the Illinois Do-It STEAM website that is accessible for students and teachers all around the state for free. So that's a really cool project we're working on. And we're also attuned to the quantum research that's happening in Illinois as well. There's been a couple multi-million-dollar grants from the US Department of Energy coming into Illinois at Fermilab and Argonne National Laboratories that is going to fund research for the quantum internet, quantum networking. And that's also trickling down into, not even trickling down, it's present at the University of Illinois, Northwestern University, and UChicago. So we're trying to be on the button with that and communicating with them and bringing that into K through 12 and seeing how those pipelines will work.
Got it. Well, that sounds like really great, impactful work then.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's very exciting. I am truly acting as a sponge with all of this because, again, STEM is not my background, but I'm learning so much with this, and I'm able to provide some perspectives in these projects in terms of project planning and thinking about how this relates to more than just the state of Illinois, thinking federally, thinking even what projects are happening in the EU and in the world today that are relating to what we're trying to do here as well.
Wow, so that is a lot then.
It's a lot, but it's again, like we were talking about, it's good to have multiple perspectives on things and really keep the grander picture in mind of what we're trying to accomplish.
So speaking of multiple perspectives, I think especially some of our members would be wondering if you know roughly sort of what the breakdown is in terms of the backgrounds of the various people who came into the fellowship in terms of, more social sciences, humanities versus STEM and other things beyond that.
Yeah, so the fun thing and the interesting thing about this fellowship is there's, I believe, 5 or 6 of us that received a fellowship this year. I personally have a background in social sciences. I believe there's a fellow from social work. We have someone from the College of Business, but then also crop sciences and animal sciences. So there's a good mix. And I think depending on the host agencies that apply to be a part of the fellowship, it's really on what they are wanting for their fellow and what job they want them to complete in their job description.
Got it. And can you talk a bit about, do you know where some of those other people ended up then?
Yeah, so we have the Department of Agriculture, we have the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Department of Natural Resources, and 2 state representatives' offices with the Latino Caucus and the Black Caucus in Illinois. So it goes, we have legislative representation as well.
Wow, so like 2 branches in addition to a pretty big spread then.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a really interesting project, or I guess it was a really interesting fellowship to look at and say, where do I fit in? Where can I fit in any of these departments? And do I? You know, it was intimidating at first, saying like, I don't really see a direct fit for myself here. And honestly, I wasn't sure about how this would really play out, but I had really great conversations with those that interviewed me, and it somehow worked out. So I think there's a widespread of things that these employers are potentially looking for within this fellowship.
Got it. And can you talk a bit about sort of how the matching process and sort of, the whole application process
Absolutely
works out then?
Yeah. So with any application process, really, you send in your CV or resume and you get letters of recommendation, and you write a cover letter for yourself saying pretty much focused on what you want your role to be in your career with public service. That prompt may change, who knows, within the coming years. But that's what I did. I sent this into Extension, and this was, I believe, back in January or February when I sent this in. And so waiting period, I heard back from the Extension office, from the coordinators at the Extension office, and they let me know which departments of the host agencies wanted to meet with me for an interview. And so I did my interviews with them, which was very interesting because I personally got to interview with, I think, 5 of them between ag, natural resources, innovation and technology, and a couple others, but just to see the vast array of what they would like to see out of their fellow and having different conversations and really think about how my skills and my educational background can fit into these different agencies. So we went through that, and basically the way that it works, and I talked to the coordinators, and they think that the process is going to be similar for this next round of fellowship applications as well. They'll ask you to rank the interviews that you had in the agencies, saying, number 1, I definitely want to work with this agency, and down based on the interviews that you have. And the agencies will rank as well. And then there's sort of an internal matching process between the agencies and the coordinators at the Extension office. And they work together just to see who best fits what agency, and kind of because it's such a small class, they have the ability to have conversations with one another and talk out where they think each candidate would fit best. And then you'll get an email saying if you've been matched or not, and then you accept or go from there.
Got it. So it's a bit of a two-way interviewing matching process then?
Yeah.
And you have some input in terms of, well, obviously they pick two, but you do get some input in terms of where you end up.
Yeah, exactly, which was really nice. So I felt very confident. I guess after the interview process, it was nice being asked what my opinion was based on the interviews that I had. And I felt that it ended up for the best for everyone. So,
Well, that's some pretty helpful information then for anyone else who's interested in this.
yeah, absolutely.
Something I guess I'm a little interested in then is since you came from a social science background, sort of, can you talk about how your background and experiences before sort of helped you throughout that application process and up until the matching?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with my educational background at Illinois with global studies, German, EU studies, the magic word that likes to be thrown in is interdisciplinary. And I truly think that that set me up for success in this application process and also within my current position with Do It is receiving an education that helps tackle issues from all sides. I took classes, like I said, I was enrolled in a biology class on global biosecurity. So I got a biologist perspective on some worldly policy related issues and also like anthropology, sociology, again, global studies, political science. So it really helps when you're approaching an issue or a project and you're keeping all of these other things in mind and not just having a one-sided approach to something. So again, the interdisciplinary background. When I was a graduate student at the EU Center, I was also a graduate assistant and I was able to take on a couple projects. So I have project experience and project leadership, project management, working in teams of all sizes. And something that I always love to throw in is I was a member of the Marching Illini. So time management and working with big groups and small groups and being able to really focus in on the projects that you need to at a certain time. And so I honestly think my extracurriculars in that way and kind of flexing other muscles of my brain, like being able to play music and marching at the same time. Just that's more just general life advice as well.
But yeah.
Being able to bring all of your hobbies and all of your professional experiences into your work life. And that's really helped a lot. So I would say having experience in leadership and project management and working with teams and communicating are never things that are going to hurt you when you're entering an application process like this.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess because you spent so much time at UIUC,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk a bit about like sort of specific things you would recommend getting involved with that you think, because obviously it's a huge university, there's a lot of resources. Yep. Anything in particular that you thought was really great that you got involved with?
Going to talks. I know that looks a little bit different this year. I mean, maybe it's easier even if you can attend a talk virtually, but going to talks, even if there's something that you find interesting, but you're not really sure how it plays into what you're doing here and now, go to it, listen to it, take some notes, find other perspectives. I've never regretted going to a panel or a talk or a conference because I always learn something, even if it's not something I'll expect to learn. Hearing from experts from just the university, from your department, but also all over the world. I think I really took a lot from those that I went to. So just gain different perspectives on these issues. That's something that I definitely would take away from my experience at U of I. And there's tons of them all the time. Get on listservs and figure out when these events will happen and see if you can just work them into your schedule.
Mm-hmm. And since you did, now I will plug the EUC as an excellent mailing list to get involved with because A, that's why we're interviewing you, but B, I have heard about all sorts of cool talks from everything like Brexit to like various transnational movements, archaeology. There's just all sorts of cool stuff that eventually sometimes ties into things that you're interested in.
Absolutely. It's an opportunity to network as well. Finding names that you weren't aware of across the university and saying, I if you email a professor that participated in a talk and you just say, hey, I saw this talk, I'm really interested in this, but I don't know a lot about it. Would you be able to recommend some readings to introduce me to this? Or if there's anything in the future that you're going to be a part of, I would like to know. That never hurts. So just always ask, always be curious about what's out there with the university. Because like you said, UIUC is such a large university, so many resources that it can feel overwhelming at times. So break things off into small chunks and start where you're familiar and just ask where to branch out.
Got it. That's great advice then. Let's see what else we have. So I guess another question I have then is, like we've been talking about a bit, there's a lot of stuff that does apply equally well to people who came in with a social science background and sort of, STEM PhD students and whatnot. But there are some things I'm sure are a little different. Can you talk about sort of what you think were sort of the differences that might come into play, especially for this kind of fellowship?
Yeah, with STEM versus social science students. So with STEM, I think, especially in the position that I'm in right now with my fellowship at the Department of Innovation and Technology, there's just some fundamental things that with science itself that I'm not particularly aware of. Like, for example, with quantum research, I think I've had to do more background research and learning myself about what that even means, whereas someone coming in from physics or something more in a STEM major might know the fundamentals of what quantum is specifically, or how virtual reality works, how supercomputing works, where that's not something that I fundamentally received in my education at Illinois. So it's definitely helpful to have that. So sometimes I'll be on calls and I just won't have that perspective to bring to the table on the fundamentals of how it works, but I have the perspective of how this plays into policy, how this plays into maybe like a bigger picture. So I think having a STEM background will definitely help you on the fundamentals of that, of course, but having a social sciences background makes you just have the perspective of, for me, it's global studies, having a more worldly perspective, having my finger on what's happening across the Atlantic Ocean, which is helpful and not helpful sometimes. Usually I'll chime in and say, hey, Europe's doing this too. Maybe we should also pay attention over there. But I think, again, it depends on what the host agencies are looking for themselves as well. If they want someone that has a fundamental knowledge of something in STEM, then that's obviously going to help you really well. If not, then you can draw out so many of your other skills like research and project management and to help benefit you in these positions. So it's very contextual, I think, based on what's available.
Got it. Okay. So in that case, are there any particular areas where you think STEM people might come in a little shakier that it would help to, sort of reinforce on the front end?
Gotcha. I would say, I'm not sure. I don't want to bash any STEM kids here. So I don't know, but I would say definitely project management, get into positions of leadership, or just, maybe take charge on your next group project or in your lab. And also writing. I think being able to write down your research and talk about it is really important. Being able to write, for example, one-pagers or white papers within policy, and be able to make a project plan succinct so that when you send it along to the legislature, even maybe the governor's office, you have something in a piece of paper that's easily readable, that's really quick and succinct, and summarizes what this project plan is coming along. So I think the part that ties in, obviously, the policy into the science side is just trying to bridge that gap between a political science major, for example, and a STEM major, and make sure that you have the communications skills down pat when you enter this field.
That makes a lot of sense then. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess sort of something else in that case that I'm sure that at least I'm interested in then is, what are your sort of longer term career plans past when your year is up for the fellowship?
Yeah, so awesome question in the time of COVID. But my sights are still set on the foreign service. That's something that I always really wanted to enter when I started my undergrad even. So studying and doing the foreign service exam to become a foreign service officer is a dream of mine. But also I think something to keep in mind, something that's really important, is to have an open perspective of a career path. So I wasn't necessarily, before even this fellowship came along, I wasn't necessarily considering entering state level government specifically. But now that I'm kind of in tune with it and I'm becoming more familiar with it, I'm thinking, well, maybe I could stay on with do it if they wanted me to, or just stay at the Illinois policy level or state level policy and see what I can do with that. So the road is wide open for for that, but I'm looking out towards foreign service, foreign policy. So absolutely, I mean, getting any policy experience in general is such a good stepping off point with this fellowship. So I'm really excited about that.
And so do the hosting agencies, do they sort of offer an option to, I guess, extend or convert you into however the state level works for, long-term employees at the end of the term, if that's what they want?
I think if that's what they want, I think the overall goal of this fellowship is to keep postgrads, postdocs in policy, in kind of state level government. But it's, again, individualized to the host agency of what they want to do, if they want to extend you an offer. So I can't speak on the behalf of them and any of the future agencies that might apply to be a host. So it just really depends.
Got it. And speaking of other agencies, do you know, sort of, because you're in the first class and I'm sure they tell you something about what's going on, do you know if there's any others in the pipeline for considering joining the program?
I honestly can't tell you that. I'm not sure. Once they start coming out, I'm sure we might hear from the project coordinators. But I let them know that I was speaking with you today, and I'm going to make sure that you guys are in contact with them, and so that they can give you information as soon as they know it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll definitely pass that along then when we hear things. So I guess those were sort of, the big specific questions that I had and that other people sort of suggested going into this. I was wondering if I just wanted to give you an opportunity to, talk about anything else that either interests you or you think would be important to bring up.
Yeah, sure. I think with this fellowship in general, it's important to keep an open mind. I honestly, when I applied for it, it was, I was in my last semester of grad school and I was starting just to apply everywhere, kind of getting the, like, oh no, okay, I need a job after this. I need some sort of direction. So I wasn't expecting necessarily, you don't really go into any job application with too high hopes because you don't want to let yourself down if you don't get it. But so I really I just took a shot in the dark and I tried and I put my best effort into my application process, and I'm exceptionally honored that I got to be a part of this inaugural class and have this experience. So even if you're not sure, even if you take a look at the host agencies for the next year, for the next application cycle, and you say, you know what, I really don't know where I would fit in here. I'm not really sure where it's going to help my career trajectory. I would still say go for it, apply for it, and see where you get with it, because I've been taken into an opportunity that I'm learning so much. I'm getting great experience, under the surface, even though I'm working with virtual reality and STEM education in Illinois. Under the surface, I'm getting so many more career and life skills that I wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. And so I'm so thankful for that. And it's been a wonder. I've only been in it for about a month and a half now, maybe 2 months. And I've already learned a great deal and I'm so happy where I'm at. So if you're even slightly interested in it, apply for it.
Got it. Well, on that note, on behalf of everyone at SPG, I want to thank you for your time and talking to us about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
we're all really also pretty excited about this fellowship since it was so new. It was, sort of a bit on our radar because it involved the university to an extent.
Hmm.
And we're hoping that eventually some of our members might see what you saw in it and, hopefully some people enjoy it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any questions, if any of your group members see this and want to reach out to me, please let me know. And also I can ask the other fellows of this class, and if they want to engage with you as well, I'd be more than happy to try and put you in contact with them just to maybe get some other perspectives as well.
That would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was great to talk about it and reflect on the work that's been done so far.